So today we have a different take on the traditional keynote. We are joined by 3 open source contributors that have found a special way to give back to the community. As you will hear, they didn't always consider this to be a true contribution. They join us today to talk about non-code contribution and how using your passion and skills can help power open source. It's my pleasure to introduce our 2021 Drupal GovCon Keynote, the co-hosts of the Talking Drupal podcast, Nick Laughlin, JohnPicozzi, and stephencross. Enjoy the show.
This is Drupal GovCon, an annual conference by a group of people with one thing in common. They love Drupal and work in government. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today we're at Drupal GovCon recording in front of a live virtual audience. Today we welcome GovCon attendees as we discuss non-code contributions and how using your passion and skills can power open source. First and foremost, thank you to the GovCon organizers for inviting us to speak today and bringing awareness to the value of non-code contribution. I'm JohnPicozzi, Solutions Architect at EPAM, organizer of the Drupal Providence Meetup, co-organizer of the New England Drupal Camp, and, if it's not obvious at this point, co-host of Talking Drupal. Joining me today are my co-hosts, stephencross and Nick Laughlin. Stephen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Super happy to be here. I'm an independent contractor. I've been working with the federal government for about 5 years, and all of that time has been spent with the ATF. I started building websites that actually do things around 1998, so it's been a long time. And I started using Drupal around 2008, I think is the time. And I founded this podcast and invited you guys to it back in 2013.
Nick, what about you?
Hi, happy to be here too. I've been working with Drupal since about 2008 as an independent contractor myself. And I've been part of the podcast since the beginning, since 2013.
So for those of you not familiar with Talking Drupal, this is a podcast with an audio and video feed. We recorded our 300th episode in June of this year. We've had over 175 guests and just about hit 700,000 audio downloads. So it's been a lot of content over the past 8 years. It is a weekly show. We cover a variety of topics, some technical, some not, including like this past week, we released on Monday our 315th episode, which was with Tara King, who's the Director of Development Relationships at Automatic. And we had a show talking about comparing Drupal and WordPress communities. You can find the podcast going to www.talkingdrupal.com. And this certainly is a little bit different episode for us. First, it's live. This is the first time we've done a live episode, guys, right? And you can see I don't wear a hat. Anyone who's watched in the past, I have a collared shirt and no hat. And I think Nick got a haircut today. Is that right, Nick?
Yep.
And John, you look exactly the same.
I tried to, I didn't want to disappoint anybody.
So Talking Drupal, this keynote is going to be a little bit different because it's like our show, weekly show, which is a discussion format. So today we're going to have a discussion. So let's get started.
Before we get started, if you have any questions during our talk, please drop them into the chat, and we will have time at the end to answer audience questions.
So today we are talking about non-code contribution, using your passion and skills to power open source. So let's start with a very simple question. What is contribution in an open source project?
So, I mean, it may be obvious or it may not. So it's providing your time, skills, and or resources to benefit that open source project.
So today we're talking specifically about non-code contributions. So early on, and actually in a lot of open source projects, if you talk about contribution, it means writing code. Over the past few years, I think, especially in the Drupal community, we've really started to open that up and see the value of other types of contribution to the project. I think this is kind of a call to action, something I've been thinking about over the last couple of weeks as we prepared this show or keynote. Drupal kind of breaks it out into code contributions and non-code contributions. And I think rather than defining it by what it isn't, rather than saying non-code contribution, I think it would be helpful to come up with a term that says what it is rather than what it isn't. I've not been able to come up with a term that kind of fits that criteria, so I'm definitely open to suggestions. But I think, defining it by something, positive rather than, what it is, and will certainly help move that contribution forward.
We debated this quite a bit, right? About whether we should recommend a new term for non-code contributions. So I'm wondering, do you guys have any suggestions?
I mean, I feel like contribution is contribution, whether it's non-code, code, but as with anything, there can be a debate around that. So
moving on a little bit, I think one of the real strengths of Drupal and the Drupal project is its community, and the community is definitely built around meetups, camps, conventions, things like this today. So if you're contributing to a camp and you look at it from that perspective, the majority of a contribution has nothing to do with coding when you're looking at camps or cons. Whether you're attending the convention, whether you're speaking, whether you're training, whether you're organizing, all of those activities are contributing to the Drupal project. So you being here, listening to this keynote, yes, you're contributing to the Drupal project.
And I mean, if you think about it, let's just take the idea of organizing a camp, right? We not only do we do a podcast, but we're also all organizers of the New England Drupal Camp. Shameless promotion, nedcamp.org, happening November 19th, virtually online. So you can check that out after the keynote today. But looking at a camp organizing, right? There are a number. I'm not even going to put a number to it because there are so many possibilities for non-code contribution and improving, not only the event, but the community around that event. So, looking at each of us and our roles for the New England Drupal Camp, I have taken over as the current lead for the camp, doing day of logistics, when we had a venue, doing venue coordination, signing contracts, that sort of thing. Nick is, sticking a little closer to building websites, working on the NedCamp website, but also doing something that's totally out of the web space and the technology space, working on signage for the event, getting those printed, working with the printer and design to work on designs. Steven's doing sponsorship and was the lead for many years before we switched roles. Overall, like volunteering at a camp is a great way to kind of get your feet wet with a non-code contribution. Again, just one example of camp. There are many ways to get involved that aren't related to writing code.
Some of those are, if you think about it, mentorship, documentation, training, summits, being a part of a committee or a board involved in Drupal. How about just answering questions on Slack or the issue queue? Jumping into IRC. That's still around, right? Is the IRC still around?
I'm sure it is.
Okay,
I haven't been on in years.
Yeah, there's lots of ways you can contribute.
So who is a contributor? This question is really easy. Everyone is a contributor. Everybody has something to contribute. Everybody has a skill or a passion that they can give to an open source project and back to the community.
I think we're a bit of a good example of that. You don't have to have a lot of skill either. I mean, if you look back when we started this camp, we basically were talking to each other. I mean, our skill at the time was getting on a video call and chatting. So it doesn't take a whole lot of skill. So it makes you wonder why people contribute? You know, I consider contribution to be a relationship where you give something to the project and the project gives you something back. And if you don't get that something back, whatever that is, the length of time that you contribute would probably be small. So I'm curious on what you guys think about some of the ways and reasons why people contribute.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that people can contribute is it can help benefit your skill set. You know, wherever you lay on the spectrum of technical skills or communication, if you're contributing, you can kind of get that positive feedback loop where somebody a little bit more experienced than you might give you some tips, or somebody a little bit, you might be able to help somebody who's a little less experienced. And in the act of, you know, helping them out, you know, teaching is a form of learning as well, and that can help improve your skill set too. So you can definitely benefit skills around project management, especially if you're talking about non-code contributions. If you're looking at helping move something forward in the issue queue, there's an element of project management there. So there's a lot of skills that you can hone and improve just by contributing to the project.
And I mean, overall, you know, career benefits, right? So Nick just talked about skills, so we don't need to go back over that. But you know, being involved in an open source project can provide visibility too. You know, hopefully everybody here has a Drupal.org profile. Hopefully it's up to date, and you know that shows, you know, how involved you are in the community, what you're doing in the community. I recently just found out that you can actually add contribution roles to your Drupal.org profile, and that shows up on your if you attribute your company, it shows up on your company's Drupal.org page. You can, going again, not to hop on events, but you can, you know, build personal networks, and you know, through networking at events, and networking at events in general is a great way to boost your career, and that all kind of falls under contribution, and just helps you become a better contributor and helps you possibly get a better job.
Let's talk a little bit about compensation for contribution. Often when you think about open source contribution, or for me anyway, what comes to mind is just donating my time. So my time on my nights and my weekends to a project, whether it be code or non-code type contributions. And I think oftentimes it starts that way, where someone gets involved in a project by donating their extra time, but it doesn't need to be that way. You can contribute as part of your job. There's many employers that support open source, and when they support open source, it means that your time, or a portion of your time, could be dedicated to a particular project. There is a benefit there for both the company that you're working for and for the employee working on it. It includes like you could work on external Drupal projects, or projects or related projects, or internal projects that you want to open source to the community. So there's lots of ways to approach this. And then the last episode I mentioned earlier, 315, that we released, we were talking about community, and there's something interesting we learned about WordPress, and that they have a program they started in 2014 called 5 for the Future, which WordPress encourages people, companies, and individuals to contribute 5% of their resources to WordPress development. That could be in the form of financial contribution. It could be in the form of resources of skill and time. And since this is a government conference, it's also good to note that back in 2016, the Obama administration released the Federal Source Code Policy, which is like an open support for open source, and is encouraging agencies within the federal government to work together. And they put a mandate that 20% of code created should be open sourced. So how that works in your particular agency, you need to look into that a little bit and figure out how that works. But I think what to do is to start a dialogue with your employer to figure out ways that you can incorporate open source into your day-to-day work.
So I'm talking to you guys, but also looking at the chat, and Josh just asked a question. Why do you continue to contribute? And I think we're going to answer this now in why we contribute. Right? Contribution, in my opinion, can be personal, like donating to your favorite charity or playing your favorite game. Right? We do it. We all do it for different reasons. So I'm going to turn this question around and I ask Nick, Nick, why do you contribute to open source?
Yeah. So when I answer this question, I'm going to answer specifically about Talking Drupal, but I think it applies to a lot of things. I think there's three kind of different stages. The beginning was I started the contribution of Talking Drupal because I was asked. I mean, if Stephen hadn't come to me and asked me to be part of the show, that never would have started. The kind of midterm, kind of kept it going long enough to really become established was I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed meeting with John and Stephen and Jason in the beginning and Jay really, really in the beginning. To talk about different topics and have guests and, enjoying doing the podcast helped sustain it. And then really long term, what's really kept it going for 8 years and made it, it allowed me to continue contributing is that it's helped my career. I can attribute a lot of my current clients and past clients either directly or indirectly to the show. Either they heard about me because of the show or they reached out to me through a contact that I'd made because of the show. So I think, at the three different stages, there's different things that have kept it going. But for me, those are kind of the three primary reasons.
For me, to interject here, I do want to reiterate a point that Nick made was ask. It's such a great point is ask the people around you to contribute. Makes such a big difference if you make the ask. And I'm glad you brought that up, Nick. For me, why I contribute is about sharing and learning. I think people see that the ones that work with me on a daily basis now will see that I often am sharing stuff. Usually technical stuff or maybe pictures of cats sometimes too, but I like to share information. And this format, this discussion like we're having today was a great way for me to share and learn. Man, I love to learn new things. And just talking with people about tech was a way for me to learn more about Drupal. So for me, it was sharing and learning. How about you, John?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have gone through such great examples. And, for me, it comes down to helping people, solving technical challenges. I think the education piece that you were just talking about, Stephen, is super important as well. Knowledge sharing is obviously very important. And it is funny, you alluded to this. The show got started by, with us getting on Zooms and being like, hey, I'm having this issue. What do you think? What do you think? And then all of a sudden we're like, well, maybe other people could use this, right? And I think at the end of the day, supporting something larger than myself and trying to make the world a better place through open source technology is another reason to why I contribute.
So let's talk a little bit about how we took our passion and started this podcast, because you could take your passion and turn it into non-code contribution as well. So this was long before Joe Rogan's podcast deal with Spotify of $100 million. Back in 2008, my youngest daughter was in 5th grade. For those trying to do the math right now, I think that makes her 23. Anyway, she was in middle school and learning about the election. It was currently the Obama-McCain election that was coming up. And I had so much interest in podcasting at the time. I thought it'd be a great opportunity, and she was excited to do it, to create a podcast about the election for middle school kids. So we created a podcast called With Liberty and Justice for All. And like many podcasts, it lasted 7 episodes. She lost interest. As you could see, I didn't lose interest. I kept going. But what that did is it gave me an insight into what the mechanics were of a podcast, how hard it was to put together. And also got me thinking about how much feedback we got from just those 7 episodes. We had lots of feedback from people all over the world, interested in what we had done in just 7 episodes. So it was exciting. We had also, back around 2010, I think, started a virtual book club. And it was basically this type of discussion with a group of people thinking about website design and development. And we picked a book. We would pick a couple of chapters each week, and we'd hop on Google Hangouts, I think it was at the time, and we'd talk about it once a week.
And sometimes John would read the book.
John very rarely read the book, but John loved to talk. So it came up. That's where the podcast came from. It was like these guys that I was talking to weekly about web design. I said, let's start a podcast. And I reached out to them. And that's how our podcasting journey started right there. It was pretty straightforward.
Well, luckily, Stephen didn't require any reading for the podcast.
That's true. That's true. So we didn't start the podcast thinking about contribution. That wasn't in our mind. It was just kind of doing something we were interested in and sharing it with others. We didn't consider it non-code contribution. Actually, that term didn't exist back then. So I'm curious, at what point in time did you guys start to think about Talking Drupal as a real contribution to the project? So
it was always, I guess, looking back, it was always a non-code contribution. But I don't think we considered it a contribution until more recently. I think overall, if you look at Drupal as a whole, right? When Drupal first started, contribution was very focused on code and, committing back to the project. And over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've really come a long way to highlight non-code contributions through different means. An example is adding a community project on Drupal.org. That when that happened, it kind of gave light to highlighting these contributions that were outside of code. And in November 2020, that's when Talking Drupal got a community project on Drupal.org, and we went back and we started giving everybody that had ever been on the show credit for being on the show and helping the community.
Yeah, I think I kind of backed into realizing that it was a contribution because we were talking about, I think one of the camps started giving people credit for attending meetings. Mm-hmm. And I think Ned Camp started talking about doing that as well. And I think I may have been like, hey, we should start doing that for Talking Drupal. We should be giving our guests credit for being on the show. They're giving their time to be on the show, to give their expertise. And so we started talking about what that would take and what it would look like. And then I think about halfway through that first meeting when we were talking about it, I realized hey, we're also on the show. So maybe we're also contributing to the community by having the show. So John's right. We didn't really think about it as a contribution in the beginning, but I think, as the community started highlighting these contribution types, people start to realize what the value of those contributions are as well. As we were putting this keynote together, one of the things that really stood out to me thinking about it is there's a lot of contribution on the code side, but there's just as much and just as important contributions that have nothing to do with code. And putting those in a community project like Talking Drupal, I think shows a lot of value because people are recognized for what they're doing. Whereas for the first 7 years of Talking Drupal, you would have to go to talkingdrupal.com to see if somebody had been on the show. And now it's right in their Drupal.org profile.
It's interesting too. I remember when we first talked about that and then we started doing it, I remember feeling a little apprehensive, somebody is definitely going to yell at us for adding 200 episodes of Talking Drupal to Drupal.org. And, to be fair, the reception was quite the opposite. People were like, oh, this is great. And oh my gosh, this is such a good idea. And it was all very, very positive. And, my head, the fear in my head was really unfounded. And it was really uplifting to see that kind of support.
I will say I did like padding my Drupal.org profile with the 200 contribution credits in that 2-week period.
Like Nick went from like here all the way up here.
That's
Weird.
right.
How did that happen?
Talking
We all
Drupal is going to show up on one of those contributor graphs somewhere, right? for 2020.
Maybe someday.
Hey, I'm curious about how the non-code contribution has impacted you, like on a personal basis, beyond the career kind of stuff. For me, one of the big things has been a friendship. So the three of us, after that book club back in 2011, starting this podcast, we've actually created a great friendship between the three of us. That's one of the big takeaways I have for how this contribution has contributed to my life in general. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I don't want to just kind of say ditto, but ditto. I mean, the friendship is definitely one of the standout things. And even the having somebody to bounce, John and Stephen, I can bounce ideas off of you guys, or if I have a technical hurdle, I can bounce ideas off of you. But it's also certainly helped, as I mentioned earlier, it's helped with clients. Even sometimes just having, one of the real advantages is the amount of topics we cover and the people that we speak to kind of expose me to a broad range of ideas. So many times, if I'm architecting something for a client, even if I don't know the answer, I know somebody who generally knows the answer and can set something up to dig a little bit deeper. So it's been, it's definitely changed my career. It's definitely changed my life, more than probably any other contribution, I think, to Drupal.
As I'm thinking about this, I mean, I'm going to ask you guys this. How many times have you gone to Google looking for something in Drupal, and you type in Drupal and you put in the topic, and then all of a sudden one of our episodes shows up and you go like, oh, we talked about that? And you go back and listen to the old episode that you did and learn something from myself 4 years ago. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's happened a couple of times. Yeah. It's always a bit bizarre.
John, how about you?
So, I mean, I'm gonna piggyback on what you guys said but change it a little bit. Connections. I remember after we'd been doing the show for a while, I went to a DrupalCon, I think it was, and I was at a networking event. I was talking in a crowd, and somebody turns to me and goes, "Hey, you're that guy from that podcast." And I was like, what? Oh, hi. And we had a conversation, and the individual told me, how the podcast was helping them, and like making those connections and is so important. And I think overall, like, the bigger picture of non-code contribution, I think just giving me a sense of value in the community, right? And that, hey, I am helping the community. I am supporting the community. I am giving back. That was something early on in my career and in my Drupal journey that, I was a little hesitant. Like as I tell people, like, I know enough PHP to be dangerous. And I was kind of like, well, how do I help make this thing that I'm using every day better? Because like my dangerous PHP should not get out into the main project or be seen by anybody ever. And non-code contribution is a great way to do that. So shifting a little bit to why non-code contribution is important. Nick, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
It helps if I unmute. That's a little behind the scenes podcasting that you guys fortunately don't have to see. So I think we've alluded to this a little bit, but I'll state it plainly. I think non-code contributions are as valuable and necessary to the health of the project as code contributions. Mm-hmm. I think there's a couple reasons. One, I mean, there are non-code requirements for all projects that need to be taken care of. I think another reason is not everybody is a developer. I mean, obviously the project won't exist without the code, but without the community and the support of these other types of contributions, the project won't be healthy for the long term. Yeah,
I mean, I think you're looking at, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think it also opens up the variety of skills that we can bring into the community, right? As we're talking today, everybody has something that they can offer. Everybody has a skill. Everybody has something that they're good at, and being able to, open those opportunities up really allows us to bring more people into the community and get different points of view, right? So like somebody that's more, in the marketing area might have a different point of view on something than, maybe us, tech folks, and bringing those points of view together really just enrich the community overall.
And frankly, projects cannot move forward without non-code contributions. They just
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, you talk about, Nick talked earlier about being asked to be on the podcast and being asked to do this. Right. And I think, asking people that have different skills and that, hey, I know this person, they have this skill, our community could use this, and asking them like that grows the community, pushes the project forward. So let's talk a little bit about, like anything, right? There are challenges, right? There are challenges to contributing. There are challenges to non-code contribution. Nick, I'm gonna pick on you again. What do you think some of the challenges are?
So I think I'll start with kind of the personal challenge that I think is biggest is contribution imposter syndrome. So like thinking that my contribution is invaluable.
Yep.
Dealing with concerns that it's not helpful, or that nobody else will see the need, or somebody else will do it better. Mm-hmm. Those are things that I battle with sometimes. I think one of the remedies is to try to focus on your skills or your passion. So like focus on something you're good at, you're good at, or focus on something that you're interested in. Because the truth is, no matter what you're looking at, there's a need. And as long as you're honest about your skill level, if you're passionate about something, you can kind of get over some of those bumps and hurdles. But just know this, your contributions are valuable. It will be helpful. And the Drupal community is great at welcoming newcomers.
Hey,
yeah.
imposter syndrome never stopped us, guys, right? How many shows?
Well,
how many shows did we talk about? Report Builder before we had ever touched it?
Layout Builder, yeah.
Yeah, layout builder.
At least 4 times.
Yeah. I think early on, as I said, early on in my career, in my Drupal journey, I was definitely very, I had that type of imposter syndrome where I was like, oh, I'm going to push this patch and somebody's going to yell at me because this patch is going to be total garbage. And I was able to overcome that, able to kind of see that there were other avenues for contribution that I was going to be good at. I think another challenge is work-life balance and finding that balance, right? Because contribution is for most of us is enjoyable. Hopefully for all of us is enjoyable. But we all have lives and we all have jobs. And how do you balance that? I think one of the biggest things, and I feel like I've been able to do this pretty successfully, is work it into your work. Build a career based on contribution, just in general, code, non-code, what have you. Most of the companies that I've worked for, that's been part of my interview and hiring process, was asking about contribution and what their view to contributing back to Drupal specifically was. I also think that contribution doesn't have to happen on nights and weekends. Like if you have a family, you probably like spending time with them. And, there are a couple of things that you can do to alleviate the no family, I need to work on my open source contributions right now. I can't spend time with you. One of those things is adding 30 minutes to the start or end of your workday. The big scheme of things, starting your day 30 minutes early, contributing, and then jumping into work, is probably not going to have a huge impact on your overall schedule. One thing I like to do is do one thing a night. I like to, so obviously at the top of the show, we talked about, I'm involved in quite a few different things, but every night I pick something. I say, hey, like tonight, I'm going to work on scheduling for Talking Drupal. Tomorrow night, I'm going to work on, NetCamp organization. Maybe night, over the weekend, I'm going to test a patch for something or something like that. So break it up. You don't have to do it all at one point in time. And then go ahead.
Sorry, John.
I was just going to say, and I think the last thing is, providing contrib during your workday. If you can, it takes very little time to comment on an issue or to, send a quick email. If you can work that into your workday, I think everybody's all the better for it.
I mean, those tips are really good ones. The 30 minutes every day at the beginning and end of the day is a great recommendation and leads into the next topic here. Is sustainability. Is like, that's a skill that John learned or created himself to be able to sustain working on a handful of open source contributions over a long period of time. And when you first do your non-code contribution, I think there's a lot of high energy. It's new and it's interesting, and it's easy to find the time and make the time to contribute to a project. But what happens is, like most podcasts never get past eight episodes, is because you get into the grind of a open source project. And at some point it does turn into a grind, and you have to think about how you can sustain long-term contribution to a project. For our show particularly, each week, every episode is like scheduling guests for the future. It's planning content. It's putting show notes together. After the show's recorded, there's post-show audio and video creation. There's releasing and doing marketing. So there's a lot of work that comes into making a podcast, which is what we're familiar with. And any non-code contribution or code contribution takes a lot of time over a long period of time. So I know for myself, about a year and a half ago, I kind of burned out a little bit on code contribution. And I was honest with myself about it. And I had to look at my priorities and my interests over time. And non-code contributions I think they're easier to adjust to who you are and what you're trying to do over a period of time. It's easier than code contributions to get people to fill in for you or change what you're doing. So I was able to reach out to my two friends here and say, hey, I don't want to leave the show, but we need to do something different. So we adjusted, and I'm contributing in a different way than I had been in the past 8 years, and it's worked out good for me. So I think you need to be honest with yourself, and look at ways to make the contribution work for you so you can sustain it over a long period of time.
And to be fair, I think, the change that we made at Talking Drupal specifically, helped Steven out, but it also benefited the show itself. It kind of gave us a little bit more insight as to what was really involved. And I think that's part of it too, right? As far as sustainability goes and contributing in general, like, you really have to want to do it. You have to want to see the value and feel the value from doing it. And that kind of drives you to want to do more of it, and to want to do more of it during a weekend or overnight or something like that. So I think that's super important point, Steven.
Yeah, I think my only regret with those changes was that we didn't make some of them sooner, like splitting up some of the responsibilities. I think that's important too. When you're talking about contribution in general, monitor your state and make adjustments if you need to, and ask for help. Don't be afraid. Just like we said earlier, one of the reasons why we started this was we were asked, if you need help, ask. Somebody will step in. And if they can't, they'll point to somebody who they think they can usually. So now I think we're to one of the most important parts of the show, or keynote, which is, how do you get involved? How do you contribute? And I think, this is kind of a recurring theme, but one of the big things is you can just get started. If you have an idea or if you have a thought, I think sometimes it's worth just jumping in and seeing where you can get. We had a show a few weeks ago about Drupal Pod with Ofer Shaw, I think. And one of the things that really stood out to me, when he said he was creating that extension, which, by the way, if you don't know about it, you should check it out. It is mind-blowing. He didn't know how to build an extension beforehand. He said he looked it up. And now it's potentially one of the most game-changing things to help people kind of test things and tweak things in the issue queue. So I think just getting started is a really good mantra when you're looking at contributing something. Again, we said this before, but look at your skill set. If you're a designer, maybe and you're a little bit nervous about contributing, look for some design tasks. If you're a project manager, look for a project that needs some help with managing the issue queue, maybe. Or I'm not a project manager, so I don't know everything that goes into that. But you can look at what you're skilled in and find a way in the door there. Again, look at your interests. If you're interested in how containers work, maybe take a look at Lando. If you're interested in or DDEV or Doxel. If you're interested in design, you can look at the Claro issue queue maybe. I mean, there's whatever you're interested in, there's going to be a community and probably a Drupal Slack channel built around that. Which brings me to the next point. Where do you get started? I think the issue queue is a good place. You can sometimes reach out to people there. Slack is usually a really good place because there's usually channels specific for whatever subject you're looking at. Like there's a media channel. There's a Talking Drupal channel if you want to get in touch with us after. And you can also reach out to camp organizers. Usually camp organizers have a pretty good network. So if you just want to say, hey, I have this interest or this skill and I want to contribute some of my time, who should I talk to? They may have a good idea of a good starting point too.
Yeah, I think your first point there is I don't know if it's the most important, but I think just getting started, jumping in and doing what bringing your skill to the community and doing what you can to improve the community and help the people around you is what I'm taking from that. So at this point, hopefully our message has come through clearly, and you are thinking, hey, how can I get involved? How can I start to contribute, whether code or non-code related, to the Drupal community? Before we close out the show, though, I want to ask each of you what takeaways you have from today. And according to the show notes, I'm going first. So I think overall, my biggest takeaway here is that anyone can contribute and everybody should contribute. Get in there, start helping out, start making Drupal a better place. You have a skill and the Drupal community needs it.
And any contribution, small, large, just having a discussion on a microphone, they are all valuable to the community.
And beyond that, I think both code and non-code contributions are equally valuable to the long-term health of the project.
Again, I want to thank the organizers of Drupal GovCon for having us. I want to thank you all for listening. And we have a few minutes here. We'd love to open it up to any audience questions that you folks out there might have.
Okay.
Donna loves the thoughtful and insightful information, and thanks us all for sharing today. Donna, you're welcome.
I did see a question earlier from Sylvia asking how to know what projects are available out there to contribute. I think that's a great question. There's a maintainers subgroup that helps with people looking to either take over a project. We'll find a link and put it in the show notes when we release this, I think next week. But there's a group, I think Greg Boggs and Damian McKenna head it up, and they kind of keep a list of modules that are looking for new maintainers or looking for help. So if you're, even if you're not super experienced and you just want to get started, they can certainly help you find a place to get started. If you're more experienced and you wanted to kind of take something over, I think they have a long list of modules that are looking for some care and attention.
So, Stephen, Josh Miller is asking a question. I'm going to direct it to you because you are a contractor for the government. How do we get governments or research organizations excited about open source? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. It's always a challenge to get people excited about open source. So I would suggest there is, if you go to code.gov, I believe it is the URL, which the government has put that website together to promote the open source projects that are available and shared within the government. So you could start there. I think having a discussion about open source and the importance and value of it is where it needs to start. So talk about it. If you're in an organization or a department or branch of the government, start those discussions within your local community, your local network within the government, and then try to extend those to a larger audience. That's what I would suggest to do.
Do you happen to know if part of I'm assuming in government you have professional development time. Do you know if that professional development time can be used to contribute to open source? Is that considered professional development?
Well, since the government is asking that 20% of code go to open source, I imagine that time can be put to open source. I think you have to go to your leadership to find that out. There's a suggestion from Jess in the chat here that says, find a champion in leadership for open source. That's a great way to go. I know in my group at the ATF, Abby Bowman is a great champion of open source and has done a lot to help our organization make some open source contributions, which we're currently doing in our projects.
I'd also like to say thank you, Abby, for managing the banner so well throughout the show. She's been kind of running the show behind the scenes.
So I'm going to try not to botch Allison's question here. Do you have any suggestions for the practicality of getting to get contribution work on the clock when you're in a cost recovery unit or other workplace that relies on billable hours? Me posting a specific concept to my boss, not just, but we should really be contributing. So I'm going to ask that question of myself as somebody who's worked in a billable role and has worked in agency life to and fought for hey, we should contribute. Most of the time, or at least this is my opinion and findings, most of the time you can roll contribution into those billable tasks. So for example, and I know our whole talk here was about non-code contribution, but let's just for a second, say you test something on your website for a client. It is literally not going to take you any time to say on an issue, hey, I tested this and it works, or it doesn't work, I had this problem, right? So you can fold it into kind of that billable work as just a cost of doing business. And I think ultimately what you need to do is have that conversation with your organization to say hey, we believe strongly in contributing back to open source. We are going to contribute back to open source either on behalf of our client or as we're doing your project. And that's just part of the cost of doing business. And we're passing that cost back onto the client as hey, we're gonna give back because we're taking from the community.
John, it reminds me of a very similar discussion that the industry was having 5-10 years ago about accessibility, that customers don't want to pay for accessibility to be added to their website. Well, the discussion at that time was, hey, you as an agency, you build it into what you do. It's not a question of whether a customer wants to choose it and it's a line item on an invoice. It's that all the code we create is going to be accessible, and it does add time and cost to a project. And maybe open source contribution becomes another item like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the history of the internet, right? You have responsive web design, and like, hey, that was a line item for everybody, and now it's just the way we do things. Same thing with accessibility. We actually just recorded a podcast yesterday. It'll be out next week about accessibility, and we talked about that, like including that as a line item in your in your proposal is becoming antiquated, right? It should just be the way that we're doing it. So I think this goes right along with that. Like, just include it as part of what you're going to do. But it does, I will say, it does have to be made at the company. That decision has to be made at the company level, and company leadership has to support it.
Yeah, and I think agencies can approach that by saying like, hey, we're using this open source, like taking directly from the WordPress model of giving 5 back or 5 for the future. Maybe each project you identify 5% of the modules that you use, and you dedicate some time to cleaning up the issue queue or pushing initiatives forward or testing patches. And maybe they're not patches that you're even using. I mean, it's easy. If it's a patch or something that you're using on that project, then yeah, that's part of the work. But there's a lot of value, especially to project maintainers, to just have somebody help manage the issue queue and respond to other people's questions or test patches as they put them in. And that really helps push the project forward. Or giving feedback on some, there's some initiatives and tickets I know around things like adding get ignored to the root of the project or something, like looking at some of those issues and weighing in your opinion. Those are things that affect Drupal going forward. So you can easily justify sometimes, donating some of that back. And like John said, it's definitely an agency or company level decision. You don't want to just go rogue and start putting your time there, but start that discussion.
I'm going to add one little thing here too, is when you present this to your company, keep in mind that there's a corporate benefit to having credits show up on Drupal.org. You show expertise for your company. It's good marketing. It's a way for your company to shine in the Drupal community and with technology. So, and it's a way to take that avenue there.
It's a benefit for your client too. I remember, we all throughout my career, we've said, hey, listen, we contribute back to open source. A small part of your, of our time on your project is going to be spent doing that. And, it's super easy to say, when they say like, well, why? Well, you get the benefit of a security group looking at all this code. You get the benefit of, thousands of people across the world using modules and contributing back to your project to make sure that it's gonna work and it's gonna be built the best way that it can. So, I think overall it's a benefit for everybody.
I did see another question from Michael about what can we do to promote more adoption so companies will adopt Drupal more. I'm curious what you guys think.
I mean, I think we're doing it right now. Building the community, building the support system around Drupal, I think is a great way to bring it up to that number one spot. I think I'm going to guess, I have not seen the stats, but I'm willing to bet that WordPress is probably the number one CMS out there. I think one of the things that the community is specifically doing right now is working to make kind of the out of the box experience with Drupal better, and the editorial
easy out of the box.
And and easy, and also making the editorial experience easier. And I think those two things, again, as Steven said earlier in the show, if you listen to our show with Tara, it's going to be super interesting because we talk about some of those things.
I think that's it, right? Any other questions?
I think
we're done.
One last question just came in.
We got two more. One comment from Amy June, which I agree with 100%. Amy June, number one doesn't equal the best. So, we can just be fine being three and having the best community. One last question here, and this is a great one. What's a good way to nurture junior talent?
I mean, is that a planted question? Because I think a great way to nurture junior talent is contributing to open source. I mean, number one, but I mean, that's on the code side, I think, but even on the non-code side, because one of the things that I think I might have skipped over in one of my points is when you're contributing to open source, it can be, especially on the non-code side, it can be lower pressure. It's not like you're trying to hit a deadline for a client or you're trying to hit some technical hurdle. You're setting aside some time to contribute something to the project. So there's not always this huge amount of pressure to get that done. So one of the things when you're trying to bring up somebody who's a bit more junior, giving them that space that's lower pressure. And as Amy June points out, having a mentor help them out with that is a great way to really hone whatever skill you're aiming to improve upon.
It's funny. I honestly thought when you started talking, Nick, you were going to say something to the effect of have them listen to every episode of Talking Drupal.
3 times.
Oh, come on. That's just torture. You don't have to do that. But, I can't agree with Amy June enough. Mentorship is the best way to nurture junior talent. Give them tasks that they can succeed at, but also give them tasks that they may fail at and make it clear that it's okay. Like, hey, if you don't knock this out of the park, like that's fine. We're learning here. And offer them opportunities to learn and to grow. I think being a good mentor is not so much like, hey, I'm always going to be teaching you things, but I'm going to let you out and let you do things on your own. And when you run into an issue or you have a question or you maybe flat out just don't get it, you come on back and we'll work through it together. That community aspect, I think, is super important in nurturing those junior roles. Well, again, I would like to thank everybody for listening. As Stephen pointed out, you can find out more about Talking Drupal at talkingdrupal.com, and you can connect with all of us here at GovCon or via Drupal Slack or Twitter, or we are all over the place. So if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out, and we'd be more than happy to answer them. Hope everybody enjoys the rest of GovCon, and have a great day.
See you guys next week.
Thank you. What an interesting take on a keynote, right? I was excited to try something different. I want to remind everybody that sessions will resume today at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time, and then again tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. See you around.